Home, House of Multiracial Evolution, a private club and restaurant, 18341 Van Dyke. Home provides a private space for meetings, parties, or repasts. Home also provides space for people of all racial backgrounds to come together and enjoy delicious food and support the great tradition of Detroit live jazz. For more information, call 313-753-5619.
Good morning. You're watching the Stage of Accountability. My name is Willie Stamps, your host. We come to you today following up where we left off at last week. I want to thank those of you who have responded positively and those who have responded negatively. After reflecting over the comments that I've received, I decided to concentrate on the silent voices. And I want to speak this morning specifically to the silent voices. Those of you who heard me speak and didn't respond at all. By that, I mean, I'd like to share with you what's been really going on in my mind since I've decided to do this. There's an old saying says when you break out of jail with no bars, as my father said, you can jump through a plate glass window if there's a glass ceiling. You can get through it. There's a lot of scars that you'll have, and it may take a long time for those scars to heal. After reflecting on it, I realized that through the experiences of my life, I had been able to successfully get out of jail, the jail that I was in with no bars. And because of that, the freedom that I enjoyed, I wanted to share. This weekend, as I began to ask myself, why am I doing this? Something in my head said, I wish the hell I had a desire to do something else. But for some reason, this desire is so intense in my mind that I must do this. And I decided to take a ride to Ann Arbor Friday to attend a art exhibit entitled Being Black in Ann Arbor. And it was quite an experience because 80% of the people there did not look like me. But prior to going to the party, I had the privilege of sitting at my daughter's house doing some reflecting. And I thought about the conversation that I had with my grandson, as I mentioned last week. I'm beginning to listen to him more now. And he briefly shared some experiences he had had. He went to school in Oklahoma at an all-Native American college where he had a scholarship to play football. Not realizing at the time, as I was thinking about it, that his grandfather on my mother's side has been scientific evidence that we are 1/8 Choctaw, American Indian, and 1/8 Cherokee. His knowledge of the history of Native American really blew my mind. For example, he'd say, well, Papa, we'll take the trip down the Nile River, since the smoking head that I have came from around the Nile River. He said, but I'll meet you in Minnesota and we'll we'll end up in New Orleans. Not realizing that he was talking about the Mississippi River, was known once as the Nile. But anyway, that being said, again, as I looked at my beautiful great-grandchild come down the steps, I saw the eyes of my father and the eyes of many of the family members that I have. And I quickly realized that this is why I'm doing this show. Because all of my great-grandkids, they are a rainbow of colors. And if the truth would be told, their DNA ranges from American Indian, Europeans, Irish, some German. So for them to have to grow up and live a lie of being labeled just didn't seem right. It seems like there should be a conversation about who we are, who we really are, and we should share the truth. And perhaps we will be able to see our way a little clearer. So while attending the affair, I was kidding with a young man. The conversation came up. Somebody referred to him as a white boy, and he says, is that what you see? Or is that your opinion? He said, are you black? He said, because that's not what I see, and that's not my opinion. I see a human being. And I remembered at 3 or 4 years old when I had to get off the train in Cairo, Illinois, and go to the back, and I asked my mother, why? And she said, because you're colored. And I said, oh, whose opinion is that? But at that time, you weren't allowed to speak. But as we laughed and talked among friends in Ann Arbor in the streets outside we was in conversation with one of the old Black Panthers who had been a guest there, and a couple of other elders. It became clear in our discussion that it's an idea of somebody else that if we wanted to call ourselves black, why? Who are you? Who am I? Am I who someone else say I am? Or am I who I've discovered to be? So that's what I want to really concentrate on, trying to tell you people, this is why I'm here, because the conversation of who we really are and the truth about who we really are should become a subject of discussion. And GRID, the idea that I have generation reform and individual development, could do that, because there is visual and scientific evidence that if you're living under someone else's idea of who you are, then perhaps that's a lie. You're living a lie. And that's where the topic come about, where if you live in a lie, maybe the truth is killing us. That's a possibility. So that being said, I'm going to try to get back to my story of my life. I believe last week we left off talking about a promotion I had into a job that was titled property supervisor. But it really was a management job that managed the property. And but before I do that, I reflect back and remember I didn't quite explain how I got onto this particular job. I had 3 terms of being a union rep prior to this, and during the time as being a union officer, I had been through quite an ordeal of going from a janitor to a serviceman, and from a serviceman, I went to a apprentice refrigeration man and apprentice, and then switched from the apprentice refrigeration to electrician apprentice. And by this time, I was in my third term to be elected to a position as chairman. But during this time, I had successfully been to the national convention at UAW, Utility Workers Union. There was only 500 delegates there. Was only 20 out of the 500 was black. And I made my stand by calling the president at 3:30 in the morning one morning and telling him that we was going to lie down in the middle of the floor, all 19. I had one reneged. This was not true, of course. I made this up at 3:30 in the morning after meeting with about 20 people that couldn't decide on who was going to go to the bathroom, less known what we was going to do about our situation. So after they all left, I just had a brainstorm idea to call the president at 3:30 and tell him that Vice President Humphrey was speaking that day, and he had been the author of the Civil Rights Bill. And we was going to lay down in the middle of the floor when they introduced him. But consequently, after making that call, he agreed to meet with me at 7 o'clock that morning, and we had a privilege to briefly talk and briefly meet Vice President Humphrey. And the question went before him, who do you think we are? Who do you think I am? And he said, I think you are an untapped resource. And that's how the Human Rights Department was formed in the union. We agreed to form the Human Rights Department, and I was considered to be the founder and the first chairman of that particular division, which was a new one. So I spent the next 2 or 3 years trying to get a budget for that department, and created a lot of rift between the UAW, Human Rights Department, and the Utility Workers Union. Now I was suing, and also the Electrical Brotherhood Workers Union. I was suing them. So I had 3 lawsuits going, and around this time I also was developing a lawsuit against the Archdiocese of Detroit. So this, in 75, I'm going to come back after a break and tell you how the pressure was put on to remove me from the union and how I got it into management. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the stage of economics, stage of accountability. We'll see you soon.
Home, House of Multiracial Evolution, a private club and restaurant, 18341 Van Dyke. Home provides a private space for meetings, parties, or repasts. Home also provides space for people of all racial backgrounds to come together and enjoy delicious food and support the great tradition of Detroit live jazz. For more information, call 313-753-5619.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
At the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, we're working hard to protect pipes by cleaning public sewer lines to reduce flooding and speeding up the replacement of lead service lines. Protect your pipes with 3 easy tips. Pour grease into containers, toss wipes in the trash can, and check for running toilets, leaky pipes, and dripping faucets. For more tips, go to detroitmi.gov/protect pipes. DWSD, working hard to protect pipes for you.
Home, House of Multiracial Evolution, a private club and restaurant, 18341 Van Dyke. Home provides a private space for meetings, parties, or repasts. Home also provides space for people of all racial backgrounds to come together and enjoy delicious food and support the great tradition of Detroit live jazz. For more information, call 313-753-5619.
Thank you. Welcome back to Stage of Accountability. I'm going to continue on now by talking a little bit more about 1975, the transition from my union position into management. But as chairman of the division for the 3 terms, I had accumulated quite a record. I had filed 3 times the amount of grievances that had ever been filed in this division. I think it maybe 15 or 20 had been filed. I had filed 60 or so, winning about 95% of my grievances, and began to move towards trying to develop a human rights department within the Utility Workers Union. And my biggest battle became to obtain a budget that we could operate under, and that seemed to have been a problem with the National Convention authorities. We would have conferences, and they would set up a nice meeting at a resort, and my members, I had 11 members on my board. It was designed to be like a getaway for a party. But I remember clearly the first one we went to was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, at a nice resort. And all of my 11 reps showed up with their personal friends or whatever. I showed up with my family, my wife and 5 kids and a babysitter, and went about trying to spend the next 3 or 4 days developing some plans to set up the Human Rights Department in each local area. But consequently, it turned out to be more or less just a resort party, and nothing got done. So I spent the next year or so trying to ram up support to force them to give us a budget. And I remember being invited to Washington, D.C., to the UAW headquarters of their Human Rights Department and meeting the head of it. And he gave me a nice visit and a tour around Washington, D.C., and took me back to his office and showed, I think he had 12 or 13 secretaries, and explained to me how nice that was to have that access to women of that character. And then he took me to dinner that night, and he said, Stamps, you know, when you're blowing up a balloon, you can only blow it up so far. He says, I think if you keep blowing it, it's going to bust. And once it busts, man, he says, you no longer have a balloon, you know. And I looked and says, I'm always playing the dumb, I don't understand. And he said, man, you know, I think you've blown your balloon up as far as you can. You're not going to get a budget, and if you keep insisting on that, the balloon is going to bust. So I then began to understand, I think, what he was telling me. So I thanked him, and we spent the next day having a great fun in D.C., and I returned home. It was about 2 weeks or so after that, I received a call from my rep in New York, and he says, I'm going to fly into Detroit a couple of days from now. You get in time. So I'm going to be there about 40 minutes, and then I'm going to take a plane back. So I want you to meet me at the airport. So I did exactly what he said. I met him at the airport, and Silton was his name. He sat down and explained to me that the New York division had took him to lunch, basically bottom line, and told him some things that was going to happen. They offered him a $18,000 raise to put him in a position with the union, give his daughter a scholarship to college, and a company car, union car to ride in. But for that, he would have to make sure that the Human Rights Department would be followed as they saw fit for it to be done. So, and his choice was to do that or else. He said he received a death threat. So we spent 3 or 4 minutes discussing that, and man, was, he says, this is seriously what I came here to tell you, Stamps. And consequently, he boarded the plane and went back. During that time, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, one of the shows, that my son had received a telephone call telling him that it was a contract on my life. Because around this same time, they had offered me I think it was $150,000, $200,000 for myself to settle the case and withdraw, and I had refused. But this phone call had came in around that time too, and I had gotten the FBI involved. All of this was happening in '75. So, as a result of this, I prepared myself to attend the National Convention, which was going to be held that summer in New York. But just prior to that happening, my brother passed. A young brother of mine who had been trying to get employment at Detroit Edison, and so I could get him to Detroit to get better treatment for his cancer he had. But anyway, he had passed, took sick rather, and was in his passing stage, and I had to go to Mississippi. So the FBI, they agreed to give me a permit to carry a weapon, and they would assure me that they'd watch my house for me. But consequently, a few weeks after that, my brother had passed, and the National Convention was coming up. And I had to fly to Mississippi and take my family to do my brother's eulogy, because I was still in the ministry at that time. And when I finished my brother's eulogy, I flew to New York to my convention, just to find out that I had been removed as chairman of the Human Rights Department and had been replaced by a young lady named Betty Daniels. And I had no expense money, which should have been about $2,100 that I was supposed to take and go back to Mississippi and fly my family back to Detroit. So as I stood in the lobby being given this information, it was being given to me by the new chairman, a young lady named Betty Daniels. So she said, well, what, I don't know what to tell you, Mr. Stamps. She says, but I'm chairman. She says, but I tell you what, I have the authority to spend $500 a day. She said, we've got about 5 more delegates now than we had last convention. We had 25 now. So if we can get them to bring me receipts for dinner and stuff each day, and she says, I have a suite that they've given me. It's got twin beds. She said, you can spend a week with me, and we raise this money and send you back home. And that's exactly what happened. It was a time in my life that I was felt very helpless. Here I am, So we spent the week. she would go home to her apartment sometime in the day, but she always came back in the evenings, and we would just spend the night laughing and talking, go to bed, wake up the next day. By Thursday and Friday, she had the cash money, I think. By Friday evening, I had a little over $2,000 cash she had raised, and she gave it to me, and I caught a flight back to Mississippi. Realizing now that I had lost my position in the union, it occurred to me that there was a job vacancy just before I left to go to bury my brother. So flying into Memphis from New York that morning about 1 o'clock, something said, "Why don't you call?" I had a guy I knew in personnel, had owed me a favor. So I got on the phone and I called this guy about 1:30 in the morning. I said, "Jim, is that job closed?" And he said, "Yeah, it closed today." I said, "Oh, wow, man, I was thinking about bidding on it." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put the application in and I won't sign your name until you get back, unless I have to." And I'll just tell him I forgot to turn it in. It was in my desk drawer. I said, "You do that for me?" He said, "Yeah, if you," he owed me some money. And I said, "Well, okay." That's another story about how personnel works, the job market and selling of the jobs. But anyway, I made a deal to satisfy a debt he had, and he said he'd put the application in. And when I got back, we would deal with it. So that application went in, and I returned to Mississippi and picked up my family, and I returned back to Detroit and began to take a leave of absence until I could figure out which way this job bid was going to do. So I'm going to come back and tell you the results of that and how I was successful in getting into that job and what happened after that. We'll be back in a few minutes to discuss more of the education, I should say, that I began to learn, and as I evolved into that job and into the world of laundering money. And I don't know if many of you ever read the book called Spook That Sat by the Door. But I'm going to come back and talk briefly about how I became the spook that sat by the door at Detroit Edison. We'll return shortly. This is the Stage of Accountability coming to you from Highland Park. We'll return shortly.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabree. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
At the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, we're working hard to protect pipes by cleaning public sewer lines to reduce flooding and speeding up the replacement of lead service lines. Protect your pipes with 3 easy tips. Pour grease into containers, toss wipes in the trash can, and check for running toilets, leaky pipes, and dripping faucets. For more tips, go to detroitmi.gov/protect pipes. DWSD, working hard to protect pipes for you.
Home House of Multiracial Evolution, a private club and restaurant, 18341 Van Dyke. Home provides a private space for meetings, parties, or repasts. Home also provides space for people of all racial backgrounds to come together and enjoy delicious food and support the great tradition of Detroit live jazz. For more information, call 313-753-5619.
Welcome back to the Stage of Accountability. We're going to continue on with my story about how I was selected to receive a promotion. As I said, the application went in, and by the time I got back, the rep from employment contacted me and said, well, once I put your application in, he said they changed the qualification from the job. I said, well, how so? He says now they're going to require the person to have a real estate certificate for a real estate license. If you don't have a real estate license, a certificate from real estate school, because you'll be handling a lot of real estate for the company. But he pulled me aside after he came to my house that evening. He came into my house and we had a drink, and he said, Stamps, they want to make you an offer. He says, they've already picked a person for that job. And he said, to be honest with you, the person that they picked for the job happened to be the directors of the department's brother-in-law. I think you know him, and which I did, you know. I said, wow, you know, that guy I knew from some research I had done after having a run-in with him, as he was a supervisor in my department over some janitors, and during one of my grievances I had against him, I had found out that he had been fired from the company on one or two occasions, but was rehired as a supervisor in our department. So I mentioned that to the young. He said, well, you know, nepotism takes place. But anyway, by the way, he said they want to give his brother-in-law the job, and then they're going to offer you his job as supervisor. And they'll even bump the pay up to be about the same. So that didn't set too well with me. I said, well, I'm out here now anyway. He said, well, I don't know what you're going to do about the qualification. I said, well, let me think about it. I don't see how they could change the requirement for the qualification. But that night, luckily enough, I bumped into an old friend of mine while I was having a drink at the neighborhood bar I hadn't seen for a long time. And I remembered he had a real estate school, Al Duncan Real Estate School in the neighborhood. But after making a few comments to him about my ordeal, he said, well, all you need is a certificate from a real estate school. Man, I got that. And I said, what a blessing. So we left and went to his office, and he supplied me with a certificate from real estate school, because he really did have real estate school. And I had applied, me and my cousin, but I never attended. My cousin did go, a guy named Mark Stamps, and he was very successful. He became a broker in Chicago. But he said, well, you didn't go, but I'm going to give you the certificate. And I took the certificate the next day to Detroit Edison Personnel Department and said, you know, I have that. So that set off a 3-month debate and a struggle. But 3 months later, after this event, and me refusing to take what they had offered me, they finally decided to give me the job. But the EEOC had got involved, and they had investigated the predecessor, who had less education than I had, and basically no experience in terms of the maintenance experience I had, because then I had been a refrigeration repairman, I had been a janitor, custodian, a serviceman, and an electrician. So their argument was, in terms of managing property, my background exceeded the qualification of the predecessor. So the decision was made to give me the job. I never forget the day that I interviewed with the director. He clearly said to me, "Stamps, we are not selecting you for the job, but we are giving you the job because we were told to give it to you. This is a job that I'm telling you up front that you were not selected, but we have been ordered by the government to give you this job." And he explained the terms, and I had to sign different agreements that, for example, one of the main things was that I would not accept any gifts from contractors, and if anyone that approached me with a gift, I would to inform them. And I had a budget of, I think it was $50 a day that I could spend on lunch for contractors, and I had my mileage. But he explained to me how all of that worked, and everything was on an honor system. You don't have to punch a clock no more, So as I left his office and prepared to get myself in a suit and tie and come to work the next day, I reported in, and it was a disaster. It was only one person of color in the office, and she happened to be my clerk or my secretary. And her attitude was quite off the hook. But I struggled with that, and then I had one or two assistants who had turned in their resignation and said they quit. So there I was now with just the assistant who had an attitude, and no job description in front of me, basically just some list of things I'm supposed to have go out and investigate. But long story short, about a week after this, the assistant, my clerk, she decided to quit. Her excuse was that I didn't know how to spell, I didn't know how to write. I would give her a dictation, a letter, and it was just too difficult, she said, for her. She wasn't going to do my job. She wasn't going to write and read and write and spell. My spelling ability was pretty bad. But after she quit, the company said, "Well, okay, we'll let you hire your own, we call them secretary, but they actually was the clerk, the assistants. And you can pick your own one. We'll bring in 3 and let you pick your own." But during the time of them setting this up, the department head secretary assisted me in what I was trying to do. And she happened to be, I guess, we talked about my relationship with the Catholic Church. At that time, I was a minister of service in the Catholic Church, and was very active on the advisory board to Cardinal Dearden at the time. So we talked about experiences in the Catholic Church, and she says, there's a thing called sin without omission. She says, so I'm going to tell you something, Stamps, because I feel like if I don't, I would be committing a sin. She says, my director made a bet that they bet $500 that you wouldn't last 6 months. She says, so I just wanted to let you know if there's anything I can do to assist you, let me know. So that gave me a little bit of encouragement to hang in and fight whatever I had to fight. So consequently, I interviewed the 3 ladies and ended up picking one that I don't know, for some reason, I think that was sort of like a soulmate kind of thing took place. She might have reminded me a lot of my first wife. They happened to be born under the same signs, but somehow between the other 2, I had a different kind of vibe. So I hired her. And at the meantime, my chief investigator, a young white man, had decided to quit. And he decided to take me to lunch and tell me why. So at lunch, I just asked him straight up, well, why are you quitting? And he says, I'm not really quitting. I'm getting transferred to a position out in the suburbs someplace. He says, and to be honest with you, Stamps, it's not because I don't want to work for you. He says it's because what you are in, the knowledge that they have given you is so far off. He said, I don't know how you're going to make it. And he said, I don't want to be around when the shit hit the fan. He said, because there's a lot of things that is going on this job that you don't know about. So I said, just give me a brief instance, He said, for example, the Walter Sisson building, he says, you have a budget for that has been taken out. Millions of dollars, they're paying rent for that. That's built on Edison property, but we're actually renting it from another company. I said, yeah, I saw that in some records. That seemed to be, he said, yep, that's the director's wife that runs that company that they're renting it from. He said, that's just the beginning of some of the information. He said, you also have about 25 or 30 houses, 36 houses that you are in charge of that is being rented by the company to someone else. And those rentals are being re-rented. For example, they might rent a house for $150, $200 a month. And it's being rented out again for $800 a month, He said, but these are just some of the things that you're going to find out that I just don't want to be around when you find out how you're going to handle them, He said, whether you're going to be a whistleblower or whether you're going to participate, that's going to be left up to you. So I sit there and trying to absorb all of the things that he was telling me at a lunch break. And man, it became like, what am I going to do now? And as he's leaving. So consequently, I had to really pray and give some thought to that, because now I've got to go hire an investigator. And, who will that be? So we spent some time interviewing, and eventually I was told, you're not going to pick this, we're going to appoint someone to you. So they appointed a guy making sure that he was the lawsuit by then consisted of 3 people, Willie Stamps, Bernie Sanfield, and another guy. So they picked the guy that was a janitor who also was on the lawsuit with me as being my assistant, and say, this is the guy you're going to, he has no experience. I say, well, you're going to have to teach him. I'm going to have to teach him what I know, and I know nothing. So with that, I'm going to come back in the next section and talk about how that went and how I had to force the government to come in and intercede and bring the predecessor of the job back to train me. And so as he trained me, I had to also try and train 2 new people in my office that had no experience and how we handled this job. We'll be right back in a few moments with the Stage of Accountability and Willie Stamps. Thank you.
House of Multiracial Evolution, a private club and restaurant, 18341 Van Dyke. Home provides a private space for meetings, parties, or repasts. Home also provides space for people of all racial backgrounds to come together and enjoy delicious food and support the great tradition of Detroit live jazz. For more information, call 313-753-5619.
The Detroit Water and Sewerage Department is looking for motivated Detroiters to be a part of our team. We have opportunities for field services technicians, engineers, and customer service specialists with competitive pay and benefits. Make a real difference with the work you do every day. Join other Detroiters who are taking part protecting the pipes where we live, work, and play. Learn more and apply at detroitmi.gov/jobs. DWSD, working hard for you.
Have you ever wanted your own TV show? Have you dreamed of showcasing your talent for the world to see? Well, now you can. Have your own TV show. You can have your own 30-minute show. Not only will you be seen in the Detroit area, but you can be viewed worldwide. For more information, call 313-868-6612. Visit our studios and receive a free TV interview to promote your business, church, or organization by appointment only.
Hi, this is LaWanda.
This is R.J. Watkins.
Coming to you to bring you some information about the #1 detox in the nation, Lemon Burn. Lemon Burn helps to turn the fat into fit. It's for you, a happier, healthier you. Because you know healthy is the new beautiful. An all-natural way to improve your health. It promotes a healthy digestive system, attacks and reduces belly fat, as well as gives you energy. Need to get yours today. Call 313-868-6612.
Don't forget to exercise and eat right.
Welcome back to the Stage of Accountability. We're going to try to wrap this end of the show up by briefly talking about what's going on at the club for a few minutes. We have live jazz workshop on Sunday afternoons from 6 to 10 every Sunday. And also on Wednesday we have karaoke. And Monday we have open night discussion. And I want to really try and emphasize the fact that we need to really start this conversation about who we are as a people. Because just taking my story, I'm going to go back and talk about what happened in 75 after this job. One of the things I really discovered that racism and segregation is two separate issues. You know, I lived the experience of being segregated in the South, but I grew up feeling equal, separate but equal. You know, I'm just as equal to anybody else, so we're separate. But after getting this job and getting inside of a management, corporate world, I find that racism and segregation and bigotry and capitalism is all individual different things, you know. So when I look at my grandchildren, as I said earlier, to try and create a world that is different, a world that people can be judged by the character, not by the color of their skin, because of somebody else's idea, we could achieve Martin's dream possibly if we begin to deal with who we are, who we honestly, truly are. So with that being said, I'm going to encourage any of you that, under the sound of my voice, just come out and we can discuss. I'm going to try and have some guests on within the next 2 shows to talk about the struggle we went through and the experiences that we should have gained from those experiences. So I'm going to get back briefly to the job. By now I have the predecessor who have just come in with open arms to explain to me the total situation of how this job worked and how the signature authority he had been bumped down to 10,000 instead of 20. How the budget had been readjusted because of the knowledge that he had and the knowledge that they didn't want me to have might interfere. But he was a friendly guy, World War II vet, and, you know, we became pretty good friends as we took that journey to discover how he could manage all of this land, about 60,000 acres, all of this property, and how most of it was done basically with a telephone call. We had 3 ash disposal sites, for example. One site was known as Sibley Quarry. It's a place where they took fly ash out. Took limestone out and replaced it with fly ash. I mention that because that was like the first experience I had of the kickback and how it operated. I'll give you a brief example. The ash pit was putting out terrible odor, and I had to get waste disposal license so I could sign off on this. After we treated it, we had to treat the water with peroxide and then pump it back into the river. There's more that I could go into on that, but just to tell you how this was happening, I was riding down in the pit one morning and I saw watermelons and I saw tomato plants growing. And I said to the caretaker, how is watermelons and tomato plants growing out of fly ash? And he laughed and he said, that's sewage sludge. So with that, he opened up the conversation about how the sewage sludge was getting put in and how much a load was being paid for it to bring in. And that led on to many other things that was going on that he shared with me. And, I had to confront the predecessor about it, and that's when the truth about a lot of things had to be told to me by my predecessor. And that's when I realized that, this whole thing about the 10% kickback, the 10%, it's real, and how am I going to deal with this, the predecessor I asked, he said, well, actually, I've been still, even though he had left the job, he was still collecting his share. And he was going to encourage me to follow his lead and that everything would be okay. So without getting into so many details of how that took place, but I took that journey with my prayer partner by my side, encouraging me that make sure what I do it for the right thing and for the right reason. And I chose my family and my kids to be the right reason. And we proceeded to train me. He proceeded to train me and introduce me to the world that he had lived in. And that became I don't know how to explain it or how to really tell you what I went through for the next 5 years. After the lawsuit was going on at the same time, I had my church. I had my 3 nonprofit organizations that I was trying to run. So the picture of the footsteps in the sand, that's when I really knew my faith in my God, the God of all gods, guided me through this. By 1980, I believe it was, I had endured so many different things. By then, I had at least 2 or 3 attempts on my life made. I had my motorhome was attempted to be blown up. My daughter's car had went up in flames. I had maybe 1 or 2 heart attacks, and I had probably been institutionalized to a mental place for at least one time. But I'm going to close out today with that thought that I shared these things with you to let you know that God gave me the strength to endure all of this. And I'm going to come back next week and share with you the worst part of it was being investigated by the State Crime Police Department and how close I came to being put away in jail for being a part of something that everyone else was doing and everyone else benefited even to today. I'm going to give you a breakdown of how when after the company discovered who I was and the knowledge that I had about what was going on, how they divided themselves up and divided the power among themselves and excluded me from, as one of my dear friends that gave me the shrunken head that I have, when I discussed it with him of why, he said, well, Stamps, at the last meeting I went to when I tried to get you into the situation that I'm in, he said, I was told that Stamps is like a rock, and putting him in here would be like putting a rock in a pot of potatoes. He just don't blend in. And this would happen to be a grandson of one of the Henry Fords, who happened to have the same shrunken head in his library that I had seen in the chairman of the board's office. And that is today the same shrunken head that I have in my club now, that we're going to talk about more next week, and how the Afro-American Museum misplaced the movie that was done talking about the shrunken head and how it became a part of my desire to sue Detroit Edison. But we're going to talk more about that next week, and so I hope you will come out on Sundays to see us to the jazz set. If not, come out Wednesday. If not, just give us a call and say that you'll be interested in hearing more about GRID, Generation Reform and Individual Development. We've got to teach our kids the truth, especially all of those who have interracial marriages and stuff. Please stop and think. Let your child grow up knowing who he is, and he can decide what he wants to be based on his individuality, based on the knowledge he knows of himself, not the idea of someone else. Again, this is Willie Stamps saying so long for now, and we'll be back next week with more Stage of Accountability. God bless. Peace. I love you.
Home, House of Multiracial Evolution, a private club and restaurant, 18341 Van Dyke. Home provides a private space for meetings, parties, or repasts. Home also provides space for people of all racial backgrounds to come together and enjoy delicious food and support the great tradition of Detroit live jazz. For more information, call 313-753-5619.